to another episode of Shelter in Place Science. Today we're continuing with pollution. We did half of this topic yesterday, and today we're going to continue on. So before we get going, let's review what we did yesterday. We've got a little bit of which is it to review what we learned yesterday. So our first question asks us, I'm the pollution that leads to rising cases of childhood asthma. What type of pollution would that be? Hopefully you remember from yesterday that that is caused by air pollution. Our second question is, I'm the pollution that can change the pH levels, that means the amount of acid, that is in lakes and ponds. So what kind of pollution would make that happen? That, if we think about lakes and ponds, they're water, so that would definitely be water pollution. And finally, our third review question from yesterday, I'm the pollution that is the leading cause of preventable human deaths. And if you remember from the video yesterday, we saw that billions of people are living without access to safe drinking water, so water pollution is a major area of preventable death due to pollution. So yesterday we focused on air and water pollution. Today we're going to be moving into waste pollution and light and noise pollution. Our first one, waste pollution, is a pretty broad area. There's a lot of things that fall under the category of waste pollution. So we're going to start there by filling in our note paper, and then we're going to look at some examples of all the different types of waste pollution. Please remember that we're using the same note paper from yesterday, so you're just going to continue it on. It's available in Google Classroom if you need it. So let's start by exploring what waste pollution is. Waste pollution. Littering or dumping garbage impacts living things on land and in the ocean. 80% of all plastic trash in the ocean comes from land-based littering or activities. A greater concern is hazardous waste, chemicals and substances that stay in the environment and interfere with body processes. So there is a lot here with waste pollution, because waste pollution happens on both the land and in the water. And so this might get a little bit confusing with, water pollution, but it has to do with the fact that these are substances, physical, usually solid substances that don't belong on the land and don't belong in the water. And as it says there, 80% of all plastic trash in the ocean comes from land-based littering or other activities. So just because the trash might start on land doesn't mean that it stays on land. And we'll also talk more about the hazardous waste component of waste pollution, because that is something that we do encounter in our everyday life, because we do all have substances in our house that are not substances that you necessarily want to put in your body, things like paints, some things like insect killers. There's lots of substances out there that can become a problem if they get into the environment. So let's start with the first two bullet points. Let's talk about the littering and the dumping that causes such a huge problem on our planet. So we're pretty familiar with waste pollution, or what we call litter, right? When people drop trash on the ground and they don't put it in a proper recycling or trash container. So we all know that this is bad, right? It looks bad, and it just is not good for the environment, because we know lots of animals and other creatures will come and mess around in this trash. We know it's not good. But the problem that we saw on the note slide is that this trash, it doesn't necessarily stay here, because remember, there is wind on our planet. And so wind is going to come along and it's going to pick up this trash and it's going to move it to different places. Those might be places on land, or more often, that ends up pushing this trash into water. And a major way that this happens is with things like leaf blowers, which I hate. I could do an entire video on why I hate leaf blowers. They are so bad, not just for air pollution and emission of carbon dioxide, but they also contribute to putting waste pollution into waterways, because the leaf blowers, not only do they blow leaf and dirt, but they blow particulate matter and pieces of trash, and then they end up getting in the water. And then that is where we have a major problem with waste pollution. So waste pollution includes pollution that's both sitting on land and in water. And when it gets into water, we know that that becomes a problem because there's lots of things that live in the water, and as we've talked about before, all water on this earth is connected, so what blows off the land in California doesn't stay in California or the Pacific Ocean. It can travel pretty much anywhere. As we just saw on our note paper, 80% of plastic trash in the ocean came from the land, right? It came from activities that happen on land. And it's not just about pieces of plastic like this bottle that are big enough that we can see and we could go and scoop out with a net. It's the problem of how plastics break into smaller and smaller pieces, what we call microplastics. And we are beginning to see evidence that this plastic is sticking around in the water and in the environment for a much longer time than we thought. So one of the articles that I have in Google Classroom is about what's called the plastic age. This was a new piece of research done by the Scripps Institution of Oceanography, which is where I used to work and intern when I was in college. So definitely check out this article because it talks about some of the long-lasting impacts of waste pollution in the ocean. Speaking of plastic, we have to remember that there's lots of creatures who live in the ocean. So for you and I, we might see the difference with this picture, but something like a sea turtle doesn't. And at this point, I usually ask students to explain to me, like, what does this picture mean? What does that title, you see the difference, a turtle does not? What does that mean? So since I can't call on you, I'm gonna have to kind of explain it myself. But hopefully what you notice from the picture is that jellyfish can look a lot like plastic bags. And some of you may know that many species of sea turtles, they eat jellyfish. And there's lots of other creatures out there in the ocean who like to snack on jellyfish as one of their main sources of food. So if animals like sea turtles get confused and a plastic shopping bag looks like a jellyfish and they go to eat it, that has horrible consequences for that animal's health. And we know that we have rescued and found bodies of lots of things like sea turtles, different kinds of seabirds, even things like dolphins or whales, and we have found plastic bags inside of their stomachs. So it's very bad for sea creatures when this waste pollution gets into the water. And what makes it very bad is that because of the way ocean currents work, it kind of acts like a giant collection source for garbage. So if you didn't know, right off of our coast, if you head out in the Pacific Ocean, out kind of heading towards Hawaii, there is something called the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Because of the fact that the ocean currents in this part of the ocean basically go in a giant circle, it means that all of the trash ends up accumulating there. And this is not a good thing, especially if you are a creature who lives in the largest ocean on Earth, which is the Pacific Ocean. So there is so much out there about the Pacific Garbage Patch that I invite you to explore. I've attached a video in Google Classroom that is just one of like hundreds of possible ones I could have shown you. So definitely check out the Pacific Garbage Patch, and teaser, this might be something you want to do your end of the year research project on, right? This might be something that you want to do research on and you want to maybe try to come up with solutions to solve. So if you're really interested in this, keep that in mind so that way next week when we start talking about project topics, you can come back to this. So we've just looked at waste pollution in water, but let's get back to the land, right? Because a lot of waste pollution does not end up in the water because it's often too heavy to get picked up by the wind, and we also have to worry about things that leak, that might be hazardous substances that leak and stay in the ground and that can end up having long-term consequences for future people who go to live on that land, or animals and plants that try to make their lives on that land. So now let's shift to talking about waste pollution that happens on land, and we're going to focus on the category that we call hazardous waste. Now, I'm not talking about like hazardous waste that are made in like laboratories or nuclear power plants. I'm talking about the hazardous waste that you and I have that are just part of our daily lives and our households in order to make, our homes work. Those are the kind of hazardous waste that we're going to take a closer look at. So if you didn't already know, in Santa Clara County, which is obviously where we live, there is a household hazardous waste program where you simply go to their website and you make an appointment and you can go drop off whatever kinds of things your family has in the house that are things that cannot go in the trash can. Related to that, in February 9th, 2006, California passed a U-Waste law, also called a Universal Waste Law. And this law made it illegal to put certain materials into the trash because of the fact that they're dangerous to the environment. So those include fluorescent lamps, bulbs, and tubes. You can't just put them in a trash can. They need to be properly recycled because they often have mercury inside of them. Any kind of battery, your AA, your AAA, your C, your D, any of the little button cells, 9 volts, any of that stuff, whether it's rechargeable or single use, those all have to be recycled. Same goes with car batteries, especially car batteries because they often have lead in them. Don't put your batteries in the trash, hold on to them. You can take them to most like hardware stores, sometimes even a place like Safeway might have a battery drop off. I know at Hoover, we have a battery bucket in the copy room, and that's where I always bring my batteries. So please do not put batteries into the trash. Computers and television monitors also are under the U-Waste law. If you remember when we had our Google Meet a couple weeks ago, we talked about the fact that all kinds of electronics have different kinds of metals inside, and those are not things we want just sitting in the environment. So computer and television monitors have to be recycled. All kinds of electronic devices, computers, printers, VCRs. Some of you don't even know what a VCR is. Cell phones, telephones, radios, microwave ovens. All of these have substances inside of them that can be toxic if they're left in the environment. And then any kind of mercury containing items, if you have like an old mercury thermometer or an old mercury thermostat, those definitely have to be brought in for proper recycling and handling. And this also includes too, any kind of household and landscape chemicals, pesticides, sprays, paint also fits under this category too. So there's a lot of things that we have in our homes that we need to make sure they don't end up in the trash can, because we don't want them getting into the ground and then staying there for hundreds and millions of years and causing long-term damage to the environment. So what could you do at home to help prevent some of this waste pollution? Well, I think the answer is pretty obvious. Please help by picking up trash that you see. Now, obviously, you should probably put on some gloves to do this, but whether you're at home or when you're at Hoover, when you're at school, we need your help to pick up trash. It's one of the things that I know annoys me, and I would also say Miss Palmieri, it annoys her a lot too, is when students are just walking down the halls and they don't stop and pick up trash. Remember, when the wind blows, that trash is going to move. It's going to leave our campus. It goes into the nearby neighborhood. That trash that blows in the neighborhoods, it gets its way to the storm drains that are along our streets, and then it ends up getting into the Guadalupe River or the Los Gatos Creek, and then we've contributed to waste pollution in water. So one of the biggest ways that you can help in your day-to-day life is if you're walking around and you see a candy wrapper or a chip bag or something on the ground, pick it up and put it in the trash. If you want to reach out in a bigger way, I really encourage you to get involved with some of our local cleanup efforts. So there's an organization, it's called cleanacreek.org, cleanacreek.org, and they're one of the local agencies that does some of the nationwide cleanups. When you're in 8th grade, you can get community service for doing these, so you'll be able to meet your middle school community service requirement and also help out our local environment at the same time. So we've talked about the major types of pollution. We've talked about air pollution, water pollution, and waste pollution. And all of these were kind of obvious, and I bet you already knew about them before you ever watched this video. But the last one is one that we often don't consider to be a type of pollution: light and noise. And it's not only something that causes problems to humans, but light and noise pollution can be very damaging to wildlife that is living around us, both here in cities and also throughout the rest of the nation. So we have to realize that light and noise pollution, artificial light and noise, drown out natural landscapes. They take what is natural and they change it. So for example, here in this picture, this is a picture of the United States taken by satellite at night. And if you notice, large parts of the country are not really dark as we would expect them to be at night. And you can imagine if you are a bird, right, who's trying to migrate and fly over places at night, this could be a little bit confusing to you. This could also be confusing to creatures who are used to dark skies at night, things like our bats. There's all kinds of different moths, and not to mention all kinds of predators who hunt at night. So light and noise can change our natural environments, and sometimes animals are able to adapt to this, and other times it causes a lot of problems. So noise is especially a problem if you are an animal trying to communicate with others of your species. So noise pollution is a real problem. Human-made noises like construction or train noises or traffic, they can block out the sounds of birds and frogs and other animals talking to each other, right? Wild birds communicate at about 80 decibels, but a train horn can be 110 decibels. So a lot of wildlife has to adjust what they do and how they communicate with each other because we create such a noisy planet environment for them. So it's not just noise on land that we have to be concerned about. There's noise in the water. And one of the major places that this has been happening recently is in the Arctic. Noise pollution definitely happens throughout the oceans, but in the Arctic is a particular concern. There is a lot of exploration that's being done to find deposits of oil and natural gas that are at the bottom of the ocean as well as on land. And in order to do those surveys, they use technology called sonar, which sends out waves of sound in order to help them detect where there's oil and natural gas deposits. And that's really bad for things like our belugas and whales who are trying to feed, they're trying to eat their food, they're trying to communicate with each other so they can breed and reproduce, and this can be incredibly stressful to all kinds of sea life that lives up in the Arctic, as well as all kinds of sea life found throughout the world. And we are only just beginning to understand exactly how much this noise has an impact on life in the ocean. So one of the videos I put in Google Classroom is about the impact on noise pollution on cetaceans. Cetaceans is the general term that we use for whales and dolphins and basically mammals, right, who live in the ocean and breathe air. So I would encourage you to check out that video, and again, this could be another great topic for your end of year research project, is looking at noise pollution and how it affects different creatures in the ocean. Going back to light pollution now. Light pollution definitely disrupts sleep cycles of both humans and animals, and there's studies to suggest that it can lead to the development of cancer. Our bodies, as well as the bodies of many animals and plants, we have these things called circadian rhythms, right? Our bodies respond to changes in daylight in order for us to produce different kinds of chemicals and hormones that tell our body what to do. So some of you may know that there's something called melatonin that has a role in affecting if we're awake or if we're sleeping, and that development is helped by being exposed to daylight. So what happens is when humans as well as animals are exposed opposed to artificial kind of light that comes from street lamps or just from buildings, it can change our body's ability to respond to signals that we need from light. A particular animal that I want to highlight that is at risk of light pollution is sea turtles. And this might seem odd because we would think, well, wait, sea turtles live in the ocean, they're affected by water pollution and waste pollution. But when sea turtles come to shore to lay their eggs, and then when those eggs hatch, there is a big problem with light pollution. So I've included a video link in Google Classroom for you to check out a video about how light pollution affects sea turtles. Let's just say it's bad, right? Because sea turtles use light as a signal to help them figure out where the ocean is. And if humans have lights on around areas where the turtles come out of the water, it can really confuse them and it can end up leading to their death. So light pollution is something that we need to be aware of because it affects a lot of wildlife. So we've seen a lot about different types of pollution. In addition to the normal self-quiz that I have with this video, I want to put forth a challenge to you. I want to give you something that you can do by drawing it, by using some pictures, or you could also use something like Google Draw in order to make something. I'd like you to think about making what we call a public service announcement or an advertisement. Something that would get people's attention and make them aware of one of our pollution problems. So what you want to do is pick a type of pollution, water pollution, air pollution, waste pollution, light pollution, or noise pollution. Pick a type of pollution and create some sort of poster or image or maybe even a short video that shows the damage that the pollution can do, and then it offers some sort of solution. And there's lots of different ways that you can make something like this. You may have seen this kind of picture. It says protect our water, right? It's got this pipe putting all kinds of pollutants. There's a basketball, some soda rings, and then we've got the, swan with the little ducklings looking very concerned. The turtle's got a plastic bag on its head. So this is a very simple but powerful image, right? It shows the damage we're doing, and it pretty much suggests, right, protecting our water would mean not doing these things. You may have also seen images like this. It says, tune into battery recycling, do the positive thing, recycle your batteries, right? Kind of a play on words because we know batteries have a positive end and a negative end. So these are examples of very simple posters or images that get people to be aware of, hey, there's a problem, and potentially offer a solution. So that's something that I would love to see what you come up with. I know it can be a little bit difficult to attach things in Google Classroom, but there should be a way for you to be able to do it. In this Google Classroom, there should be a button available that says create. You can also email me directly, but I'd love to see what you come up with. What are some ways that we could make people aware of some of these pollution problems and motivate them to take action? So that's all for today. Tomorrow we're going to take a little bit more of a deeper look at ways humans are impacting the biosphere. So I'll see you tomorrow.